Hello everyone, this is Nicole Johnson-Starr with the PTSD Retreat, continuing with Pam Killeen out of Canada and also with Urian Plesman out of Australia. It's our Friday night talk, and if you haven't listened to part D, as in Delta, we are now on part E of the 6 senses of PTSD, where we're doing part 1, part E, where we're talking about how what we're putting into our body is actually affecting everything we're doing, our biochemistry, the way we think, the way we process information as it comes into our system, and how right now we're talking about the toxicity of metals within our system and how it's creating a cycle where we actually are going after more metals. And Urian, you got cut off in the last time where you were actually talking about copper versus zinc, and zinc, needing more zinc. So go ahead and please continue.
Yeah, there's such a thing as heavy metal intoxication, and that can interfere with the zinc level. So when you have a lot of zinc, a lot of lead in you, the zinc level goes down, the copper level goes up. So when you find that it's been tested, the doctors can test it, and they find it, so you the zinc, the IV that active here. Of course, zinc is in enzymes. And zinc is very important. The world is zinc deficient because we have been going through soil year in, year out, and after 50 years, the soil is deficient. And so, in Australia, because Australia is well zinc deficient. Well, probably Pam knows all about it. So,
right. Well, my approach to getting rid of copper is different than Urian's. I have a 2-year program that I use to get rid of the copper, and it's very systematic, very delicate process. Really, there are 2 reasons for the copper toxicity issues. One is that the city municipal water sources, they add copper sulfate to the water as an antifungal. And then another issue is that many people today have copper pipes in their homes. And another variable is that people are not eating enough red meat in their diet. So they're not getting enough zinc in their diet in order to offset or antagonize the copper. Minerals have very, very intricate relationships. They can complement each other potentially, but they can also work antagonistically. So zinc and copper are antagonistic. So as zinc goes down, copper will naturally increase, and that's exactly not what you want. You do not want to have a reverse relationship between copper and zinc, because copper will do things like interfere with your hormones, interfere with your neurotransmitters, and in so doing, of course, will interfere even with digestion, and all of these things together, essentially as they break down after years and years and years of malnutrition. This will interfere with your mood. And then what ends up happening is, see, the adrenal glands are responsible for controlling the balance of minerals in your body. And under that umbrella, that includes the ability to basically trigger excess metals so that they take their exit. And when there's too much copper in the body, what this does is it constantly taxes the adrenal glands, because the adrenal glands are always trying to say, we've got to get rid of this copper. This is not supposed to be there. So 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, the messages of all this excess copper is taxing on the adrenal glands and wearing down basically people's energy and leading to things like addiction, because when you're feeling this loud all this copper excess, you have to gravitate to something as a stimulant so that you feel better for a little while. And gravitating towards a stimulant for a short while will turn your adrenal glands on, ostensibly, but at the same time, and as you turn your adrenal glands on, you have some energy to pick up some of this excess copper. But unfortunately, after years and years and years of trying to synthetically give yourself some energy, at the same time, you're depleting your body's energy, or like I always call your batteries, because your adrenal glands are like your batteries. So after years and years and years of ignoring the root cause of the problem, unfortunately the adrenals keep getting weaker, filter, and they end up losing their ability to be able to kick out excess metals like copper. So
Okay.
that's where people, will fall into very severe addiction issues as well. Now, I'm oversimplifying something that's a rather complex thing. I work with this on a daily basis. But I know that I can't get somebody with a mood disorder or an addiction back running on all 8 cylinders unless I get rid of their copper. And
Okay, I've got a question directly in relation to copper.
it's not that simple. It's a very complex process which involves fixing a very important ratio in the body of sodium to potassium. And to fix sodium and potassium, it's not as simple as taking sodium and potassium.
Well, hold on a second. Before we move off of copper, I'm going to ask these questions because I know many things out there, say, copper and sulfur, manganese, chloride, all these different things are important for healthy bones. Now, are you talking that we need to completely eradicate copper, or are you saying we need to eradicate all the excess that's been built up?
For example, for healthy bones, right, when people are copper toxic, that means they're also deficient at the same time, and copper is an essential mineral. It's a nutrient mineral. So what happens in the body is when people are toxic in a mineral, whether it's calcium, whether it's copper, doesn't matter. When people are toxic in these minerals, then what ends up happening is the body makes them biounavailable, makes them deficient at the same time. So a toxicity equals a deficiency. So when people are toxic in calcium, for example, calcium will be sequestered deep into the body and become biounavailable. And this is when people get what's called a calcium shell. So they become numb because calcium is a sedative. So as calcium starts to rise and rise and rise in response to stress, then calcium becomes biounavailable. So when this happens, this is when you see people who are in their 80s and 90s and they're rigid and they're stiff. They have trouble sitting down, standing up. This is called the calcium shell. And when you're younger, it manifests itself as mood issues. These are people who go to bed at night, their minds can't shut down, they lie awake, they can't fall asleep, they can't stay asleep, they're constantly worrying.
Okay, this sounds like a PTSD symptom.
That's right. It's due to this biounavailable calcium, this accumulation of calcium that becomes toxic in the body. And this is in response to a manipulation in the sodium and the potassium. You see, in nature, when we are confronted by stress, and that stress could be nutritional stress, emotional stress, or environmental stress. These are your 2 most important minerals in your body. And so what Mother Nature did was she said, she wanted humans to survive. She wanted humans to be able to survive stress. So once the sodium and potassium go out of filter, we shouldn't die immediately, that we can indeed survive stress. And the reason why is because there's a backup plan to stress. That when we are confronted by trauma, that the sodium and potassium fall out of filter, but to compensate for the sodium and potassium falling out of filter, calcium and magnesium are the fall guys. The calcium and magnesium must compensate for the sodium and potassium going out of filter. So as the sodium and potassium fall out of place, calcium and magnesium start to rise in response to this traumatic biochemical stress that has been imposed upon the body. So calcium and magnesium skyrocket high off the page. And then Mother Nature says, now we have another red alert going on here. We have another red flag. If we don't do something about this, all this calcium and magnesium is going to kill the host. Bad enough that the sodium and potassium went out of filter. Now the calcium and magnesium could kill the host. So then what she did was she designed another backup plan, and she said, now the calcium and magnesium must hide. We must sequester this calcium and magnesium so that it becomes biounavailable. And that's the response, because this is a very necessary response in terms of our biochemistry, because if this didn't happen, we would die. And so for me, when I'm working with people with any kind of heavy metal toxicity, with the copper toxicity issue, the first 4 minerals I have to balance out in order to be able to achieve this goal is I have to first balance out the sodium and the potassium, which in turn helps balance out the calcium and the magnesium. As these first 4 minerals fall into their correct place, both in terms of the level and the ratio, then the rest of the minerals will find their place.
Now, hold on a second. Now, what you're saying to me is that what I'm hearing is that individuals should not be doing this on their own, because this sounds like there's a lot of science involved, and going out and saying, you know what, I'm just going to go to the Whole Food store and I'm going to just get these minerals myself and do it.
I see nothing but problems when people are guessing which minerals they take. I see nothing but problems from that. When people, I'm fortunate to have the program that I have. Finding the program that I have was like finding a needle in a haystack. And if people follow what I jokingly call myself Sergeant Pam, when people listen to Sergeant Pam, and they go on my program, they save so much money, they save so much time, and they save so much grief, because fortunately, I don't have to guess. And we can systematically rebuild their biochemistry by retesting them every 3 to 4 months so that I can see that they're compliant, so that I can see the metals start trying to find their place. I can see things like the copper coming out, which is what I want to see. I want to see the lead moving, I want to see the mercury moving. But most importantly, I want to see these first 4 minerals, calcium, magnesium, sodium, and potassium. I need to see those minerals fall into the correct spots so that thyroid will work properly, so that adrenals will work properly, so that people will be able to have better blood sugar control, because these minerals, especially the calcium and magnesium, play a huge role in terms of the ability to control blood sugar in the body. So these 4 minerals, it's a very intricate thing that I do. I don't talk about it very much simply because it's very new. It is science, it's very scientific, but I don't see the medical schools embracing it anytime soon.
And that's really sad, because it sounds like, one, if we have individuals like, well, we'll just go with this, if we have our doctors knowing our bodies this well, I have a feeling we'd be using less drugs overall and getting our bodies more in balance. Now, Urian, you've actually talked about getting our bodies in balance and also making sure that we are being very careful about our levels within our blood and everything else before. What do you have to say about this in answer to this?
Well, I'm a little bit more optimistic than Pam, amazingly. I believe that people, without the help of the experts, can get themselves better by adapting to natural diet. Now, I happen to call a natural diet the hypoglycemic diet, which will provide all the amino acids. If you go back to chicken meat and eggs and grass-fed cheese and pork, you will get all your amino acids in your food. So people can cure themselves if they go on the natural diet. But there is one thing that I still want to emphasize: there is a general deficiency of zinc, both in America and in Australia. Especially in Australia, is natural zinc deficient, and that causes the copper level to rise. Now, when you have a high level of copper, you have a low level of zinc, and you increase your zinc, it can lower your copper. And so therefore, zinc supplement is very important in the hypoglycemic diet, because zinc is involved with 80 enzymes, and without the zinc, the enzymes can't work. So I'm a little bit more optimistic by people being able to become healthy and happy on the hypoglycemic diet.
If you two could actually pick one thing that individuals... Now, folks, before we go any further, I'm going to remind you that this show is for information and educational purposes only. No matter what you're doing, no matter, who you're working with, if you decide to make a change in your system, in your regimen, in your diet, please speak to your doctor. Our doctors are not incompetent. They get to know what's missing, and they get to hear your side of it. And believe me or not, it really helps them to know exactly what you're thinking, because they do have a lot of information about your body that you deserve to know as well. And we're asking you to educate yourself so that you can assist your doctors in working with you. So please go to your doctor, tell them what you're thinking, tell them what you've heard, and work with them as you make these decisions for your health. So now that said, and also please don't go cold turkey on your medications. Please, please, please don't go cold turkey on your medications. Talk to your doctor. So that said, my butt is now covered legally as well. folks, Pam, Urian, what would you guys say if you could tell them one thing that they could do? What would you suggest, one thing immediately that every single individual deserves to be doing right now? Urian?
Go on the hypoglycemic diet, talk to your doctor, but if the doctor doesn't listen to you, go to a nutritional doctor. There are doctors trained in nutritional medicine. There are very few of them, but they are found all through the research. There is a website called Alternative Mental Health. You can get a lot of information there. Read, and it is all available on the internet.
Okay.
I did a radio show just the other day with Tom McConnell. It's on my multimedia page. If people go to pamcolleen.com and then we click on multimedia content. I did a radio show the other day about it's a New Year's resolution show, and it's about the top 10 things people can do to improve their health. So that show is you can find it on my website. But the number one thing I put on my list was that if people could actually go and source their food from local farmers, that would be the number one resolution for people this year if they're trying to get healthy, and that way they can use their farm as their pharmacy.
Okay. I love that. And for any of you guys listening, I am so sorry. The background noise that you may be hearing right now would be my 2 dogs snoring. So please forgive them as they snore in my background. Pam, I love that you said that because I believe so strongly in using our local farmers. When you guys support local farmers, not only are you learning, one, you know exactly where your food's coming from. You build a relationship with that farmer, which means you most likely are going to get cheaper prices on your food because the farmer would actually rather give a discount to someone he has a relationship with than to a huge company who's just going to mark the prices back up. So speak to your farmers. You'll get great prices. I know for a fact I get them here in Maryland when I go to the local farmers markets. And there are local farmers markets everywhere in this country. I don't know about Canada. I think Canada is a really strong proponent of farmers markets as well, correct?
Yeah, we have a lot of farms in my area where I live in London, Ontario. And if you can just go and get your animal protein from these sources, then you can easily follow the hypoglycemic pattern, the hypoglycemic diet that Urian keeps talking about. Then the protein you want to get is hopefully from pasture-raised sources, pasture-raised animals, but also fatty. You want to make sure you're not eating lean meat or skinless chicken or turkey. You want to make sure the skin is on there. You want to make sure that the meat is nice and fatty, because the emphasis of our calories should be on animal fat. We should be getting about 70% of our calories from animal fat. And that's what helps improve synaptic transmission. That's what helps improve the communication of neurotransmitters across what is known as the synaptic cleft in the brain. And that's what helps in terms of making sure that you are, number one, producing your neurotransmitter, but number two, it's got to land on something. It's got to cross a cleft and it's got to land on a dock. And that's what the animal fats are important for.
So you're saying, just breaking it down into even easier communication for the kids that listen, you're saying they need to eat healthy because it increases communication within the brain.
Right. In terms of the chemicals in the brain, it's nice to be able to produce these chemicals, and that's what the amino acids are doing. They're helping to produce neurotransmitters like serotonin. The serotonin has got to travel across a valley, if you will. It's got to travel across a gap. And for that communication to happen effectively, that's what animal fats are important for. So the protein is for actually producing the neurotransmitter or the chemical. And number two, you need to have the animal fat for proper communication to take place. And in nature, of course, the protein and the fat are always together. But in the history of mankind, we never ate lean or low fat. We always celebrated animal fat. We knew if we ate lean meat that it would make us sick, that we would get a tummy ache, for example. So it's the animal fats that really help with the digestion and the assimilation of the protein. So this is how nature designed it, but unfortunately, as we talked about last week, we had this unnecessary and wrongful demonization of animal fat and protein, and this is unfortunately leading to this bad food epidemic. It was really in the 1970s when the low-fat lie hit its hiatus. And it was then, after the 1970s, it was the 1980s where you start to see more and more mood disorders, more fatigue, more depression, so on. That's when I collapsed with chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia. It was in the 80s, but I very religiously and faithfully, in the 1970s, listened to the dietary dictocrats and followed that low-fat lie. And unfortunately, it really almost killed me in the end. I was so incredibly sick for so many years, debilitated with chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, multiple chemical sensitivities, and he was even diagnosed with ADD as well.
You know, you're killing my relationship with my in-laws.
Really?
Yes, they're all Southern. So now they're going to be able to tell me, Nick, we told you so. Because they believe in some of these
I'd like to emphasize the ATP, that's biological energy. People with hypoglycemia have not the biological energy to transform the nutrients in our food into serotonin and the feel-good neurotransmitter. So most people that are mentally ill are found to be hypoglycemic, and therefore you have to treat hypoglycemia, and that is to do it by the hypoglycemic diet.
Well, I what I was saying was I'm happy to be wrong in this one area.
Well, animal fats taste so delicious. They're good for you and they're delicious. The food tastes so much better.
I believe in animal fat. Yeah, of course I believe in animal fat. People that are depressed are hypoglycemic, and you should not overlook this. You have to treat the hypoglycemic before you can get them better. You know. And it's just simple. It's so simple. That's the frustrating part of it. I have treated people with PTSD with about 6 months, 80% stop being depressed.
Well, that's definitely something we deserve to focus on because, excuse me, one of the biggest issues right now in the United States and across the world that I'm hearing from experts is that the suicide rates are climbing through the roof. You guys already know them here in the United States. It's horrid. It doesn't matter what the numbers are. The fact is it's horrid. And depression is a major part of that. I also believe that medication is assisting that depression, but it is definitely something that really deserves some focus, and dealing with that depression is very important. I also feel there's more to it than just I just had a brain fart. There's nothing worse than having a brain fart in the middle of a radio show.
Well, on that note, the World Health Organization is saying that depression is going to be the second leading cause of disability worldwide by 2020. So you're right. We have a tsunami on our hands. Things are going to go from bad to worse. The medications are really making matters worse. This has been journaled by a medical journalist by the name of Robert Whitaker. He's written a couple of books. One of them is called Anatomy of an Epidemic. And essentially what he has been able to chronicle is that as people are on these medications, that they're doing more harm than good in many cases. That
yes,
for one, they're not dealing with the
underlying issue.
The hypoglycemia. They're not dealing with the malnutrition, the mineral imbalances. They're taking a medication that is ostensibly damaging an already damaged brain. As people are taking these medications, they end up with more problems later on in life as well. So then they need more medications.
Thank you.
To deal with the damage from the previous medications that they were on.
Exactly, and that was where I was going. The more it's just creating a perpetual cycle. And we have individuals going into geriatrics. We have that were from earlier wars that are now also having issues with Alzheimer's. More Alzheimer's is coming forward, and as you know, that deals with stress, and they're saying that individuals that have PTSD may have more issues later on with Alzheimer's.
You will find studies on our website that Alzheimer's disease is associated with hypoglycemia. There are studies to show that. So it's not the only cause, but hypoglycemia causes so many other diseases like arthritis, osteoporosis, and all the many of the cancers are due to hypoglycemia.
Right. It all starts from the roller coaster ride of the blood sugar problem that we're having today. Urian is absolutely right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and not only that, and I also make a think that if you treat people with hypoglycemia, because I'm dealing with prisoners, and our prisoners are so right at the bottom of society.
Yeah.
They need medical personality transformation. You can't do it without first treating the metabolic disorder and then do the psychotherapy. You don't psychotherapize anybody with a physical disease. Talk therapy are diseases. But once you have treated someone with hypoglycemia, you can teach psychotherapy tools, skills, because people in prison have a pretty serious personality disorder that needs to be reconstructed.
Agreed. With anybody, if you start them out with a very good diet, Pam, you mentioned this before last week about water, too much water in the system, but overall, would you all agree that there gets to be balance in that diet, not just, eating the right things, but so making sure there's balance in everything else, make sure there's not too much of these other minerals that could be affecting the brain, but getting that body back into balance with itself.
Another problem I see that people are going to be shocked to hear me say is overexercise is a major contributor to a lot of mood issues, because essentially overexercise is going to deplete your batteries. It's going to deplete your adrenal glands. So when I'm working with people who have mood issues, they're under instructions to complete, to do rest and only rest. If they do any exercise at all, it has to be gentle exercise, light movements, because I don't want them wearing out their batteries any more than they already have. So my clients are not allowed to jog, they're not allowed to ride a bike, they're not allowed to get their heart rate up. They must be in a complete state of rest, and I tell them that I want them to visualize their adrenal glands as being in a cast, like they've broken their arm or they've broken their leg.
Mm-hmm.
And they have to find this state of relaxation, a state of peace. It's hard to do when the biochemistry is out of whack. So they have to find strategies, they have to find things to do as an alternative if they were indeed an over-exerciser. And I'm guilty of that. I was an over-exerciser for years, and it took me a long time to realize how counterproductive all that exercise.
I actually am writing a paper on that right now because it raises our cortisol levels. And it's increasing the stress within the body. And that stress creates a change within our mental facilities and everything else. So I'm so glad to hear you say that, because I push the fact that exercise is great for the body, but not going above and beyond. Pushing ourselves beyond our limits and continuing to push. Just because you need something to kill what's going on, all you're doing is increasing the stress within your body. You're not letting yourself rest, and that is a big issue here with our soldiers, with our individuals, especially in our families. I know that I have a very, very close friend. Whenever she gets stressed, she does two things. She bakes, and then she creates guilt, and she runs. And she runs like there's no tomorrow. Her body is breaking down. Mm-hmm.
And so people want to find things to push that sodium and potassium up so they have a little bit of energy, even if it's synthetically derived. So they'll gravitate to sugar, they'll gravitate to caffeine, they might gravitate to crack cocaine, whatever that. But exercise is also a stimulant.
Yes.
Exercise will actually also push up the sodium and the potassium, but it's just as addictive as a drug.
Oh, yes.
And when people actually stop this heavy exercise, they can actually go through withdrawal, just like they were on the drug.
Well, the adrenaline rush. Hello, adrenaline junkie. And a lot of our military are adrenaline junkies. And I don't say that in the meanest way or even in a judgmental way, because it serves our purposes. But that balance is sadly lacking. We work hard, play hard. That is military mentality here.
Yeah, we're raised in this Iron Man thinking that you have to go out and do all of this type of exercise, and that it's somehow good for and he was the foremost researcher on the adrenal glands, and he was right here in Canada at McGill University. If you look at human history, for over 99% of our history, if we ran, if we exerted ourselves, it was for no more than 2 to 3 minutes at a time, and it was to either eat or avoid getting eaten. So we never really, our biology is not designed for, going out and jogging for, long stretches,
Now, go ahead and explain about those individuals that are coming out of Africa, though. We've got those great runners from Kenya who can run millions of miles and be like, oh, yeah, let's go. Now we finished our warm-up.
Talking about the Maasai, and you see the Maasai, look at their diet, right? They live on blood, and they live on meat, and they live on raw dairy products. They live in very primitive environments, and yes, they are known for their athletic skill, but they know to train. When they train by consuming things like raw cream. You're not going to see these people drinking garbage like Gatorade or anything like that. I mean, they're drinking the most nutrient-dense product you can probably find in terms of giving you real energy. And the same thing with in the primitive Swiss culture. The top athletes there, they would have been training as well with things like raw cream, from grass-fed. In order to be able to endure, but they also know to counterbalance all that excess cortisol and adrenaline by knowing how to relax as well. So when somebody is healthy enough, they can probably do heavy exercise, but if they do it, they must be really healthy in the first place, and they must know how to bring down cortisol and adrenaline appropriately after they have exerted themselves in this activity.
That just brings... Go ahead.
Rush, and they are the gamblers, the compulsive gamblers. They gamble, and when they test them for glucose tests, they're all hypoglycemic, and that is a hypoglycemic symptom. They have an acute adrenal rush, and there are some people that put themselves in a dangerous situation, and they enjoy it because basically they're hypoglycemic, they're down,
Yeah.
That's right, Gary, and even if you look at extreme sports, skydiving and things like that, they're trying to do the same thing. Exactly. I agree with you. Yeah. You must enjoy. I ask people to exercise, but I can master motivation. It must be enjoyment. Provide good yourself and other people. Competitive sport is not enjoyment. You have to enjoy. Or walking your dog, you have to enjoy it, and that is good. That's all right.
Yeah.
Do you agree?
Walking is a wonderful tool. It's funny. I've actually told individuals, if you're having a moment where you are having so much stress, take a nice slow walk. If you can't, while you're walking, you're starting to breathe harder, you're feeling your heart rate rise, you're not taking a nice slow walk. You need to be able to carry on a complete conversation the entire time, be able to laugh if you need to. I mean, have an active communication with somebody that's just walking and enjoy the sights. Look for those flowers. If you're looking and able to see the little blades of grass, you're walking at a good speed. A very nice slow stroll, because you're bringing your body into that moment of relaxation. You get some nice deep breaths going in, oxygenating the body and the brain. You're moving that blood through the system, and you're calming yourself down, and you're also clearing your mind. I strongly believe in that wonderful exercise called walking, and it's amazing. There are individuals, I have a lot of people that say, well, walking's not going to get me to lose weight. Actually, yes it will, and I can say that from personal experience, because with the back injury that I had, the one thing I could do was walk. I couldn't do any weightlifting. I couldn't do anything. I mean, I was walking like a toddler. As a matter of fact, the really cool thing about during that back injury was having a great grandmother on her own walker hold the door for me with my walker. But I was walking, and I lost 40 pounds.
Yeah, because heavy exercise, you're right. I mean, what it's doing, Nicole, is pushing up cortisol, and cortisol
Yes.
drives insulin, and insulin drives fat. So it's not uncommon to see people jogging and doing all these heavy exercises and they gain weight or they can't lose weight, and they're being told by their trainer, oh, you've got to do all this exercise to lose weight, and they completely stagnate or gain weight, and it's because they're pushing too much cortisol.
Yes, yes, and folks, if you're concerned about the fact that your weight's going up, check your stress levels. Go to your doctor and talk to them. Hey, look, my stress is really high.
Adrenaline does the same thing. It also pushes, grows the fat cells in your body. Adrenaline.
You're gonna have to explain that one, Urian. You're gonna have to explain that one because that is completely against everything out there about the exercising, you pushing fat cells. So go ahead and explain that statement.
There's only one thing that makes you fat. There's only one thing that makes you fat, and that is glucose. You get down adrenaline creates energy, and the energy or the glucose is not stabilized, it is then stored as fat cells. It first goes into glycogen, and when the glycogen stores are full, it goes into fat cells. So glucose is the only thing that makes you fat. People believe that fat makes you fat, but it's the other way around. It is glucose that makes you fat.
That's right.
Like glucose gives you fat.
I'm writing this. One of the individuals on our Facebook page actually asked us to talk about cortisol because her friend is having issues, not just with fat, but her stress, and she wants to know how cortisol affects PTSD. And you know what, folks, before we even go into that further, I'm going to go ahead and take a break here and say thank you guys so much for listening to this segment. We'll be right back. Again, this is Nicole Johnson-Starr, Pam Killeen, and Urian Plesman. Thank you for listening to the PTSD Retreat Radio Talk Show. We'll be right back.